So from here, we are going to move on to Connecticut DEEP. They have been gracious enough to come to another one of our events. Today, they're going to be digging into the PFAS sampling report, so they're going to be providing some more detail on the report that came out recently. And they're also going to be talking again about the CWF priority list and other things, pump station surveys. There's a few other things they're going to be here talking about, so we're very grateful for that. So first, we have Yvonne Hall, who is the Assistant Director of the Municipal Wastewater Program for DEP. Yvonne received a BS degree in chemistry and an MS degree in environmental engineering from UMass. Yvonne worked as a consultant for several years before joining DEP in 2008. She's been with the Municipal Wastewater Program and worked there for 10 years before transitioning to dam safety. And she's back in the Municipal Wastewater Group now, and she's been a professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. And we've also got Stacy Papano, who is a supervising environmental engineer for Municipal Wastewater Program at DEP. She has degrees in civil and environmental engineering from Clarkson University and a degree in chemical engineering from the University of New Haven. And she worked in the Municipal Wastewater and Clean Water Fund programs from 2002 to 2016 and rejoined the program in December 2022. And we also have Carlos Esquera. Carlos is originally from Bogota, Colombia, where he received his bachelor's degree in civil engineering. And in 2010, he obtained a master's degree in environmental engineering from University of Hartford. He started with DEP in February of 2007 and started working for the Municipal Wastewater Program in 2011. And he's collaborated on numerous planning, design, and construction projects funded by the CWF program. So with that, I will turn it over to Yvonne Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Again, my name is Yvonne Hall. I'm the Assistant Director, and it's great to be here. You know, CTWIA is always a big highlight for the DEEP staff, and it's not just because of the amazing breakfast, although that is a big plus. We're going to talk to you about a few things. I know one of the big things that was requested was the PFAS results from the sampling that was done. But we're also going to talk to you about a few other things, like the Clean Water Fund. We're going to talk to you about fats, oil, and grease. We will talk to you about pump station, the survey that's going on, and nitrogen general permit update, phosphorus, and operator certification. So first things first, there have been a lot of retirements over the past few years. It's super confusing. A lot of new people. We have a lot of new people in new roles. So I just thought it would be a good idea to run through the leadership and just the organizational structure one more time, because a lot of people ask about this. So everybody knows that Katie Dykes is our commissioner, and we have Tracy Babbage as our acting deputy commissioner. But for the Bureau of Water Protection and Land Reuse, we have Graham Stevens. He replaced Betsy Wingfield, who probably many of you have heard of or met. And then directly under Graham is Nisha Patel. Nisha, you want to stand up? Where are you, Nisha? Nisha is our director. She replaced Jennifer Perry, who had replaced Denise Ruzicka. So many of you might be still thinking, hey, maybe Denise Ruzicka is around, but it's Nisha. And then when Nisha came on board, I replaced her as assistant director. In addition, George Hicks and Roland Denny, they retired as supervisors, so we have Carlos and Stacy who will be presenting to you guys. They replaced them as supervisors. Carlos has been with the group for a very long time, and Stacy also worked as a project engineer before doing other things throughout the agency, so I'm really lucky to have them as my supervisors. In addition, we have staff engineers that started last year: Anthony Poon, Ueda Scheitko, Kareem Kazu Folger, Robin Rickards. You guys want to stand up? And our newest engineer, Smriti Hamal, can you please stand up? She's our newest engineer. She just started last month. We're continuing with our Yukon streak, so, she's another Yukon grad, and we have very good luck with that, so that's great. And in addition, the rest of you guys want to stand up? There's Syed, Kathy Chu. Who else is here? Ileana. Chris Falk, stand up. Did I get everybody? Okay. So, Clean Water Fund. Clean Water Fund has been around since 1987. It replaced the EPA Construction Grants Program. It funds treatment plant upgrades, pipes, pumps. It can be used for planning, design, and construction projects. The program has very generous grant funding. That's not always the case in other states. For planning reports, you get 55% grant. For all other design and construction projects, you get grant, and then the remainder of the eligible cost is loan. The loan is 2% interest for 20 years, and you start paying back a year after the project has completed, so it's a really great program. So we have been working on drafting the FY 24-25 priority list. Right now we have the 22-23 list still in effect, but in order to develop that, there are several sources or pots of money that we use to determine which projects are going to be fundable. So from EPA's side, we've always had this base capitalization grant that we get annually, but with the passage of bill, we also have what's called a supplemental grant, another grant for emerging contaminants, which we are hoping to use for some type of PFAS pilot project, but we're working out the details. And then not directly related to bill, but it's still a relatively new grant, is the Stormwater and Sewer Overflow Grant, also known as OSG. So even though we have all these grants from EPA, still by far the biggest chunk of our program is from the state. It's the general obligation bonds that we use for grant and state revenue bonds that we use for loan. That's by far the biggest chunk of money, and we're so fortunate that you guys lobby for the program, help make sure that it's well funded. Something to also note is that this base cap grant that we get every year from EPA, it continues to shrink. It used to be that grant we would get like $17 million a year, and it keeps shrinking. For FY24, the grant is $9 million. A bunch of earmarks get taken out of it. So, that's another issue that we have to deal with, but thank goodness for the state money. So, how do we get the projects funded on the priority list? There's 3 different mechanisms, and I'm going to walk you through those. So, the first one is categories. Category 1 is the one that's most often used. This is for projects that are shown on the current 22-23 priority list as fundable projects, but they haven't completed yet, but they've submitted an application. If you've submitted an application, but you haven't started yet, you are going to be considered a Category 1 project on the FY 24-25 list. We have these other 2 categories for projects where one part or one phase of the project, earlier phase, was done, but it's not going to be functional until this particular phase is going to help make it functional. That is Category 2, and then Category 3 is for projects that are going to fix documented pollution of drinking water supply. So then there's the categories. Those go to the front of the line. The Category 1 projects go before all the other scored projects, but then you have the scoring system. We take a look at all the projects and we score them. The highest number of points are usually the projects that are going to help us meet water quality standards like CSO, nitrogen removal, phosphorus removal. If you're serving a larger population, you're going to get more priority points. And then the lower number of points have typically been failing septic systems and these sewage backups. So that scoring is actually very prescriptive in our regulations, so we don't have much wiggle room with that. But then we've got the third mechanism, which is these reserves or set-asides. They help to balance the playing field for those projects that don't score high on the priority list, but we still think that they're important. They're first come, first serve, and with very few exceptions, like maybe the small community reserve, that's only available for communities with 5,000 people or less. But for the most part, they're available to all the municipalities, and we have the flexibility to change them over time from priority list to priority list. So these are the typical reserves that we see and that we anticipate to see in the draft list, which is still draft. We are going to continue our focus on CSO removal, but we want to focus on pipe improvement projects like infiltration inflow lining projects. Another big focus for us is resiliency. We've got this resiliency reserve, we've got this green reserve, which hasn't been really tapped in the past few years, but we're hoping to, get some projects going that'll be able to use this reserve. So last May, when we were last here, we asked you, the municipalities, to submit project proposals to us for the FY 24-25 list. And we received like $2.4 billion worth of projects. I mean, we have a lot of need, as all of you guys know. I'm not, preaching to the choir, but each project was evaluated for readiness. So if you submit, I know that a lot of people submit projects through the call for projects. They just want to put something out there. But if you have a project that hasn't started planning yet, you're not going to be considered for the FY 24-25 list. When we did that readiness assessment, we found that $900 million in projects are potentially viable projects. And so we're in the process of finalizing that draft. Hopefully, it'll be coming out soon. We hope that it goes to public notice this fall, and we'll do another public hearing virtually. So now I'm going to hand it off to Carlos. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. So my name is Carlos Esguerra, and I'm going to be going over the pump station inventory survey that we did this year. So just to situate everybody like in the context of why we're doing this, the state of Connecticut has an emergency response document that is essentially the Connecticut State Response Framework that is essentially administered by DEMIS. And that document delegated several groups, right? These are called emergency support function groups, essentially. And the water utilities are part of ESF 12, which essentially aggregates power utilities and water utilities. So under that work group, this year we have been coordinating internally within the ESF 12 group to try to improve emergency preparedness, try to improve readiness whenever we have another Isaias or Sandy or Irene. Isaias was 3 years ago, to try to improve that communication and expedite the restoration of power to your utilities. When we joined this process, the conversation kind of like gravitated around a lot of water utilities, understandably so, but we also reminded the group about the importance of wastewater utilities, right? Pump stations, basically. POTWs are well understood, but I think pump stations needed a little extra boost, in my opinion. Essentially, like I said, the purpose of this was to enhance and advance coordination between water, wastewater, and the electric sector. We try to identify priority assets within the collection system to the extent possible, or whenever the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, is activated at the state level, which is essentially the governor would activate that. That's going to set in motion all this coordination, right? So we'll be reaching out to you and asking questions. How many pump stations? How's your treatment plant doing today? So that we can convey that message to the utilities. We're not asking you to do anything different from what you're doing right now. We want you to elevate through your local emergency coordinator, but we're going to try to help you from the top down. We want to advocate for you, essentially. This is the pump station inventory. Here are some of the survey results, okay? So we send out, so first of all, we did some prep work, not, trying to determine how many communities we have in Connecticut that have sanitary sewers. We came up with about 132, and out of those, Robin Ritgers, who's here with us today, he's essentially sent out emails to all of you with some basic questions, right? We know that when you send a survey that has too many questions, the response rate tends to go down, so we wanted to try to maximize the answers. So we sent out like a baseline survey. We were also collecting information for the utilities. That is also going to help us improve that emergency response process. So we have about 87% response rate, which is great. Thank you to everybody who responded to the survey. To some of those that have not responded, we're probably going to be reaching out again and try to get 100% response rate, because this is very important. We now know that based on that 87% response rate, we have 1,008 pump stations in Connecticut, 796 standby generators. Some of them, I guess, they're repowered with a portable generator for some of the smaller pump stations. And the other purpose of this effort was to also collect utility information like billing and service account information for UI and Eversource. And we have a graph there showing like the the age of the generators. So we have a full range of that. The other purpose of this whole effort was to also get an idea of like needs at the state level. What do we have for age of generators? How many are vulnerable to flooding? You can see that table there where, we have some pump stations that are located within a VE zone, which is a coastal hazard zone, wave action zone. Luckily, not too many, but we do have that we could surmise from the survey. We have 14. So anyway, like Yvonne alluded to, we have funding for resiliency improvements. Okay, moving on. All right, we added this slide to the presentation because this is something that is also going to be ramping up in the next couple of years. This is more like a placeholder that I just wanted to put in everybody's radar. But the general permit for fats, oil, and grease is expiring in 2 years. And I know 2 years sounds like a lot of time, but it is not. Oops, sorry. FOG, it's a management. Obviously, it's a. Oh, God, sorry about that, folks. It's a key element of CMOM, right? It's a key tool to minimize the occurrence of SSOs, bypasses within your collection system. So right now the thought process is kind of like what we did 10 or 12 years ago when we issued the current general permit. Was we hired a consultant to help us do outreach to the communities and try to see where we stood, where we are, what can be improved. So we have the same thought about going, hiring a consultant and essentially having somebody help us out to scope what are some of the challenges implementing the general permit and what can be improved so that the next general permit can actually address some of those concerns. So if you have any questions in the meantime, anything that you're aware of that is working or not working with FOG, feel free to email Ileana Rafa. She's here with us today, and she'll be collecting that information about that GP. All right, PFAS, big buzzword right now, right? PFAS. So for the spring meeting, we had a pretty detailed presentation about PFAS, but for those of you that were not here back in the spring, I think the biggest update I can share with everybody is that the report that Weston and Sampson did for us between 2021 and 2022 is being uploaded to our website. It's available for consultation. It was uploaded in June of this year. Just to remind everybody kind of like the scope of the project. So essentially the sampling program encompassed 35 POTWs. We also sampled 4 sewage sludge incinerator facilities, scrubber water, and we also sampled 10 POTWs for surface water, upgrading upstream and downstream of the outfall. The map that is there actually shows the blue dots, that was the bulk of it, and then the red dots actually indicate the facilities that were sampled for surface water, so upstream and downstream. 8 PFAS compounds, you can see that on the table, were most prevalent, so they were all detected in greater than 50% of all the samples. 4 to 8 carbon chain length compounds were the most frequently observed. I'm not going to try to pronounce those names. They're hard to say, but I mean, that means that they're pretty bad, right? But anyway, those are the 8 compounds that were most commonly found in the samples. Okay, this is just a snippet of what the report found. So for influent, PFPEA, the 5-carbon version of PFOA was the most, by a lot, was the most common compound that was found in influent, POTW, influent wastewater. The effluent was more, distributed, more in the other compounds, the 8. We have the most common one was PFPEA and PFHXA, which is the 5 and 6 carbon versions of the PFOA, and they were the dominant PFAS found in effluent samples of the POTWs. All right, most common parameters found in surface waters were the PFHXA, 70%, and PFAS, 70%. Actually, the blue bar indicates upstream, the green bar indicates downstream, so you can see how in some of the effluent, some of the samples for some of the compounds, some of the concentrations were actually higher downstream of the effluent. PFAS was also the main compound found in a sludge. There were variances in types of PFAS identified in solid sludge versus liquid sludge. And PFOS is also the dominant PFAS compound found in composite incinerator sludge as well. All right, and I will pass it on to Stacy.
So now that Carlos gave us an update on our PFAS, I'm going to continue talking about what's next and what's our next steps with DEEP and PFAS monitoring. So we all know that EPA has required that the NEPDES permits incorporate PFAS monitoring on a quarterly basis. So what does that mean for us? Well, first we have to figure out how do we sample and how do we monitor. Well, the first thing is figuring out what method to use. So let me give you first an update on the method that we're going to be using, which is going to be supported by our NEPDES program, and that is test method 1633. Now, I know that we've been talking about 1633 for a while. It is in its 4th draft right now. The last draft is the QC, so quality control. So it looks like it would be adapted by maybe the end of this year. The nice thing about this method is that it's going to be for 40 compounds, and that it will also be for 8 medias. So it will cover like groundwater, surface water, wastewater, biosolids, sediment, soil, fish tissue. I think I missed one. Well, anyway, it's going to be for all media, so it's kind of a great tool for us. The other method is also in draft form. It's 1621. That one looks at the fluoride carbon bonds, And that is still in the implementation stage. It's only gone through testing one lab. Now it's in multi-lab testing, so that's a little bit more time before that will be adopted. Also, we know that in Connecticut, we have to have Department of Public Health has to certify the labs to do the testing, so that's in the final stages as well. There was, in April of 2023, there was a process, and most of the labs will be certified by the end of the year. So this is moving forward. At DEEP, we have implemented a point person for PFAS, so all things PFAS. So, because of course at DEEP we have, this is multimedia, so we have to worry about things, implementation for PFAS with remediation, our industrial group, our wastewater group, us, and a bunch of other, Air Bureau, et cetera. So we have one point person, and that's Megan Lally. She's been appointed as our PFAS coordinator, and I have her name and contact here. And there's also a DEEP website that's dedicated just to PFAS questions and concerns, and it's so deep.pfas@ct.gov. Okay, so how are we going to implement this? So we know the EPA wants us to implement it into our NEPDES permits, right? So what we're doing now is internally at DEEP, we have a work group, and we're sharing and coordinating information, everything from source reduction and monitoring, and working with our pre-treatment program for those who are discharging into the sewer system to get to the POTWs, because we know that source reduction is going to be a key component to the overall master plan of how we're going to monitor and look at PFAS. We're also looking at information and updates, so that's part of what Megan Lally is doing for us. She's keeping us in the know, because there's information that comes out every week, month, from EPA and others. So we're keeping that coordination to figure out what's going on in the industry. So what we've decided to do is, instead of implementing it through our NEPDES permit, is to look at a different strategy, and that is to do a general permit. That general permit is now under development. We're going to first look at monitoring requirements. So now that the test method 1633 is being implemented, and our labs in Connecticut are being certified to actually perform that test, we are going to put that into the general permit. We know that the EPA is looking for at least 3 monitoring points, that it would be the influent, the effluent, and the sludge, and that they want us to do it quarterly. So we're going to be determining all those parameters and how to implement that through the general permit. The next process that we're thinking about doing is, how are we going to collect the data, and what are we going to do with the data? So that's what we're thinking about now. We're going to have another internal work group to determine what are we going to do with that. So that's the phase we're at now. Is like, okay, we know we have to sample, we know we have to monitor, but how are we going to do that? How are we going to collect that data, and where are we going to store that data? So that's where we're at now. Excuse me. Implementation of the general permit will still be in development. We're at the, I'd say we're like at 25-30% development. I would say that it won't be really readily available for draft or input until next spring. And then we'll definitely have stakeholder meetings and more discussion. Okay, moving on to another general permit. The nitrogen general permit, as most of us are aware, it's expiring at the end of this year. So we did go out to public notice for a reissuance back in June of this year. We didn't get any public comment. It's in the final issuance stages right now. The effective date will be from starting in January 2024 until 5 years, December 31st, 2028. There have been a few updates with that reissuance, and one of them is going to be that you're going to have to do nitrate and nitrate testing will be reported separately. In the past, it was a combined. And the second thing is, how are we going to collect the data and store the data? So we've worked with our IT group, and we have developed a program where you'll be going into a system now and filling in like a fillable form for your data entry, whereas most of us now, remember, our NEPDES permit has an NAR form attached to it, and you've been submitting that NAR form electronically. It's like an Excel spreadsheet. through this email. We're no longer going to do that. We're going to be implementing it through a data collection like service or program. We're hoping to have that launched early in 2024, so at the same time as the general permit becomes effective. And in order to use that using system, we're trying to figure out right now about how do we get a subscriber agreement and user agreements. For those of you who submit net DMRs under your NEPDES permit, you know that you have a subscriber agreement and then you enter. So we're thinking that we'll have to probably do something similar to that. And so that's what we're working on right now. Any questions about our nitrogen general permit and all of this data entry information? Ileana Rafa is here today. She's our go-to nitrogen person for many years. And she can answer probably some more questions on that. So let's give a little bit of an update on the nitrogen program in general. As we can see, we gave an update in May on the nitrogen program in a little bit more detail, so I'm just going to summarize it quickly today for us again. We can see here from the graphical representation that we're doing quite well. Our nitrogen waste load allocation became effective under the TMDL that was adopted from 2001, came effective in 2014. And since then, we have been meeting our goals 6 out of the 9 years, right? And those 3 years that they were a little bit high, elevated, but not too crazy. The next year, 2023, we haven't gotten all the data yet, but it looks like we're going to continue that trend. So it looks like even though we had a wet year and crazy weather this summer, our operators did a really good job, and we are going to be meeting our goal again. And it looks like it's going to be trending in the same way it did in 2022, which was at 6,288 equalized pounds, I think. So it looks like it's going to be there or even less. So what does that mean for the program? Well, we know that the waste load allocation is adopted through the general permit with the participating POTWs, and so there's, of course, the trading program that goes along with that for meeting the total nitrogen load that's been allocated to the POTW. And so the buyers for this year are going to be buying at $4.56, and the sellers are going to be at 50 cents. Okay. Okay, so at the end of the year, we're going to get ready for the next 2023 season. So we're going to have to determine, what is going to be the cost of the credit and what's going to be the buyers and the sellers again. And part of that is the determination of the cost of the credit. So we need to do the O&M survey. So that's going to be coming out again. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our O&M survey. We are expecting to get that out by the week of October 31st, so pretty soon, like in 2 weeks. In the past, that O&M survey that was sent out, there was a lot of questions or errors, and we had to go back and forth with people who sent them in. So we've done a little bit of a revamping of the O&M survey to make it a little bit more user-friendly. Most importantly, we've updated the links and the information and the instructions on the form. We have, it's asked for additional entries for clarification as well, and I'm going to go over those on the next slide. We are hoping to get this sent out, like I said, on October 31st or around then, and we would like to see this come back to the department by December 15th. So we'll give you about, I think it's about 6 weeks or so. It's only for the 64 project facilities that are in the nitrogen trading program, so it's not applicable to everyone. Just wanted to clarify that. Sometimes people ask, where's my survey? And they're not in the program. And also, let's see. Oh, we're also going to look at maybe having a dedicated email address like we do for our other accounts, but that hasn't been identified yet, so there'll be more information to come. So when you get that survey, it will tell you instructions and how to send it back. Okay, so I'm not sure if we can see that screen too well. Can you guys see that okay? So this is the updated form. I put big blue arrows there. One of the things that we implemented is we wanted to ask who's the electricity provider. So if it's UI or Eversource, or if you have your own utility like Wallingford or something, put that there. And then we have color-coded instructions. And then the other big component that we added is sludge disposal destination. So where are you taking your sludge? So if you're bringing it to, say, MDC or Manabassa or somebody, put that in there so we can keep track. I don't know what happened to my slide here, but it looks like the screen here changed, so as long as it looks good here. Okay, and lastly, I wanted to talk about, it's October, and so let's talk about our NEPDES permits and seasonal phosphorus loading. We all know that our seasonal phosphorus loading goes from April 1st to October 31st. People who have that in their NEPDES permits are going to be sampling for total phosphorus every month in accordance with the requirements of their NEPDES permit. And then in October, they have to do a calculation for the total seasonal load and see if they're within the cap that they've been allocated. So I wanted to go over the calculation and what's expected to be reported this month. In October, you're going to report your total seasonal information for October, but then you're also going to calculate the seasonal load from April to October. And so how you're going to do that is, I just wanted to remind everyone that you're going to take all of the total phosphorus results, so every single sample that was collected from each month, April, May, June, all the way till October, add all those up, and then divide by the total number of samples. In the past, we've been seeing that people will take the average of the month and add up each month and just divide those, but it's actually collectively every sample that you take. So it's an actual true average of the total phosphorus. So in October, you'll be putting both of those on your DMR. If you have any questions or you have any concerns about how to do that, our point person for that is going to be Chris Falk. He's our NEPDES coordinator. Chris Falk is here today, so we can talk to him if you need any information. And lastly, I want to just remind everyone about the operator certification exams. Those are still computer-based and ongoing throughout the year. The exam did get posted on October 1st. So anybody who is applying after October 1st will be applying for the next calendar year. So those will be people who will be taking the exam in 2024. And then so if you apply after October, then you can begin your testing anytime after January 2nd of 2024. Anyone who's in the queue now, you're still will be testing under the 2023 guidelines. And so I just wanted to bring that up. And Craig Mataski is still the person who you would contact about operator certification. And with that, let's see if there's any questions. I'm sure there are.
Now, with the nitrogen trading program, we're one of the plants that's in it. You know, we have a very low limit per day compared to like a facility like Stanford. But the way it's more of a sense of pride for us rather than getting money back. And I'm wondering if you've considered some more equity for smaller facilities that overperform, that they can get more money, because we obviously, try to do our best. And for us, we're usually 50% below our daily limit or lower. So I'm just wondering if that's going to be part of the O&M survey moving forward.
Well, the O&M survey takes into account the costs, right? The operation costs and the capital costs, all those things that gets implemented into calculating the overall cost of the credit. But I would say that thank you for doing a great job. But the wasteful allocation was developed off of the TMDL for Long Island Sound, and so that's really probably giving more credit to the people who are closer to the sound than someone like you up in Litchfield who's farthest away. So that's probably taken, that can't be changed.
Rob Gross, Town of Vernon. I have two questions on PFAS. For the NIPDES permit, for the monitoring for PFAS. Is that something that we can expect next year?
So I don't want to say yes, but I would say let's start thinking about the budget because the cost of a one test, I think, is running around, it keeps going up in prices. There's more demand. It's around, I heard it was about $450. It was like $250 last year. Now I heard it's like $450. And so if we have to do it quarterly, that's going to be quite a big hit to the budget. And I would like all municipalities to have a heads up before we start that implementation. But that we're still developing the strategy of when we're going to roll it out. So in our office, general permits usually take about a year to actually develop and get noticed. It has to still go to the commissioner, get approved. So it's just an implementation. It's still in like development stage, I'll say.
Okay. And then I have a industrial user that's asking about PFAS in the future. So what do I tell that discharger? They have an individual permit.
Yeah, if they have an individual permit to go to the sewer, our partners over in industrial pretreatment are implementing PFAS monitoring already within their permits. But they're using it in a different strategy. They started about 2 years ago. So when they're up for renewal, so if they say their permits are 5-year as well as our NFTs, they will be looking at getting a sampling plan because each industry is so unique with the types of, the types of products that could contain PFAS, that they're looking for a sampling plan from them first to get adopted and approved under the permit, and then they'll be implementing those sampling. So quite a few industrial permits already have adopted or approved sampling plans and are starting to sample and monitor for PFAS within their waste streams and in their discharge.
Okay, thank you.
Just jumping back to the PFAS, at one point during the remediation with towns'
The roundtable?
fire equipment that had the AFF foam in their tankers, and there was a washout program that was ongoing. From what I understood, that maybe the money had run out, and I don't know if that's the case, or if it is, whether they're going to try to bring back some funding for towns that still need to do washouts with their
Yeah.
trucks.
I know that they phased that out to not have that anymore, but I don't know anything about the funding going. I'll have to get back to you on that. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you.
Lisa Muscanello, Wright Pierce. I was just wondering for the priority list for the Clean Water Fund, if you guys are looking at a 20% grant for pump stations going to construction for an upgrade?
That's being carried over the same as it was last priority list, but since it hasn't been public notice and adopted, I don't want to say for the record that's true. But that's the plan. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much to Connecticut DEP once again. Always a wonderful job.